Humility doesn't pay the bill.
Kim Rittberg is an award-winning ex-creative producer at places like Us Weekly, Netflix, and People magazine. She launched Us Weekly's video unit, leading to its $100 million sale. She turns people into thought leaders, and her video content has been viewed 500 million times. So of course, I had to sit down with her and have a conversation about what is the best way of establishing your credibility.
You have to have your elevator pitch.
How to build your video strategy for success.
No matter how bad I feel on camera, I said I have to keep doing this because my business depends on it.
The power of storytelling.
We went on a video podcast. We put it out there and they've gotten their dream client.
How do you conquer the fear of judgment?
Instead of thinking that anyone who sees us is mocking us, realize that most of the people are learning from you.
And how do you build real influence that drives sales?
If you want to have influence, show up on video.
If you want to establish your credibility as an entrepreneur and become a thought leader in your industry, don't miss this one. Before we dive in, I have a question to ask you. Are you part of my newsletter? Because I think you'll get a lot of value from it. It's called Speak as a Leader, and every Sunday I share real actionable tips and insights on how you can speak with more confidence, clarity, and impact. So you speak like the thought leader you really are. Just go to speaking.coach to sign up. See you Sunday. Thanks so much, Kim, for joining me. I am really excited about this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Cool. Let's jump right in. So the first question I have for you is, when did you start building your brand? Was it when you were back at Netflix or People, when you were back in the corporate world, or was it when you decided to go your own way and that's when you decided to start building your brand?
So I think the irony is that I, like many people, are, the cobbler's kids have no shoes. So I had been creating content for 15 years for Netflix, for TV news, for Us Weekly. But it really was not until I had my own business that I at all built what we would now call a personal brand. So first of all, I think it's funny, and I've been trying to rebrand for my clients. I'm now trying to call it a professional philosophy. I'm sort of auditioning new words, but I think personal brand sometimes sounds very heavy and or narcissistic. So I'm trying to, and I think that it becomes a block for people. So I like to say, your personal brand or your professional philosophy or your professional perspective. I didn't start building that in public until I had my own business. And so even though I had access to a lot of really amazing opportunities and visuals, filming for marketing campaigns at Netflix, interviewing a bunch of celebrities for Us Weekly, covering national news for TV news, the truth is the risk reward balance was off. So posting was like, at that era, I'm like, well, I could lose my job and it was not really worth it. I'm not really what's the point? And I think I didn't really see the point of it then. I mean, now I have a totally different perspective. And if I could go back, I definitely would have posted more and been more thoughtful about how strategically to build that. So I would say I had been focused on building my career and building my professional network and building respect among my peers, which I definitely succeeded in. But I did not really start building my personal brand at all until I had my own business.
I love the clarification there, because that's exactly what it is. It's about being visible beyond your immediate work environment.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of folks that are in the corporate world neglect, because of course you have so much else going on and you have a career path in front of you. You can see yourself growing. You don't feel the need to go out there and be visible beyond the immediate environment. But there's so much benefit in that. It's really about future-proofing your career.
Yeah.
And I totally get what you mean, because I went through very similar stages where when I was at work, I was just at work. I had made my LinkedIn profile back in 2007 or 2008 when I first graduated college, and it was just sitting there gathering dust. So my question to you, since you and I have both started building our brands later in life, both started being visible publicly later in life, do you find that it's tricky? Because when we start being visible on socials, we're competing against others who may not have the same experience, but we're all kind of starting from scratch. So how did you navigate that tricky environment of having to compete with others who might have less experience than you, but who are more visible?
I love that question. And actually, I was just talking about that with someone. I forget if it was like a conversation with a new client. I forget what it was, but it's very, very important to realize. And actually, one of the two things that when I teach people how to build their video strategy is to hammer onto credibility and connection. Credibility is, I started out in journalism, so I look at every stranger like a snake oil salesperson. Like, I think everyone's a scammer and trying to trick me and steal my social security number. That's like the journalist in me from the beginning of my career. What I've realized is, so does everyone else. Everyone thinks everyone's like full of it, right? And so you look online and you say, oh, this person has X amount of followers, and they how did they get so many, and why don't I have as many, or whatever. So first of all, I think there's that like envy piece, and I'm just going to put that aside because I do think we're always just competing with ourselves from 3 months ago. Like, I'm not competing with the leading influencer in my field. I'm competing with myself from 3 months ago. And if I'm meeting the goals that I've set out for myself, I'm succeeding. And I think it's a really important reframe, because I think the online world is can be awesome and it can be very negative. So I'm going to set aside the envy, and then I'm going to move into the credibility piece. There are a lot of people who do what we do. We, meaning anyone, no matter what field you're in, it's competitive. So I think it is important to remember that in terms of that world, it is on us to make sure that you're being clear about what you've done. So I have a phrase. I say, humility doesn't pay the bills. And it is on me, you, the listener, it is on us to tell someone why they should trust us. And it's not enough to just have like way down in your LinkedIn profile somewhere that you worked at Google, or, I worked at Netflix, or in TV news. No one's scrolling that far. And it is on me in this fractured, distracted world to put my accolades really high up and basically hit somebody with them. And I think that certain people, and I don't like to I'm not going to say it's a gender or it's a this or that, but some people have a really hard time with showing up first and foremost with your accomplishments. But it's very important to just treat it as a data point, and don't even think of it as bragging. Like, I think we praise, humility is this amazing feature. How many times have you been at a cocktail party or a networking event and you've thought, oh, that person's so conceited, or what a blowhard? Very rare. It's very rare to meet those people. And actually, you remember it because you're bothered by it. Most people do not brag. Most people do not share their accomplishments. So even just showing up and making sure you're letting people know what you've done that's special, whether or not that's a big company name, amazing results you've shown for your clients, degrees you have, it can be all of these things. But the credibility piece is really, really important, because like you said, the online world is basically like a flattener. We're all the same. We're all just a headshot. We're all just a headshot in a link. And so it really is on us to show somebody why we're credible, why they should give you their credit card, why they should follow you. And so it's a really important piece, and I'm glad you asked about it.
I love that saying, humility doesn't pay the bills. It really doesn't. And the ironic part is that the folks that are the most concerned about bragging or coming off as arrogant or conceited are the ones who never really will, because they are so sensitive about it. They don't want to be that person. Sure. So what is the Goldilocks way of doing this? Because you're right, you did point out that there are people who are full of themselves, and we meet them and we instantly know. So for example, I can't just go on LinkedIn and say, hi, today I did a workshop at Google, I rock. Today I did a TEDx talk, I'm awesome. Because that's not what we're talking about. That doesn't establish credibility. So what's the best way of establishing credibility in a way that is relevant to your audience?
So when we're talking about credibility, I think there's all those different situations that credibility needs to creep in. So there's those smaller settings, the elevator pitch, which is really the most common. And that's in smaller settings where you're meeting new people. Maybe it's a networking event, maybe it's a seminar, maybe it's a gathering, and you have to have your elevator pitch, and your bragging has to be in there. And I don't even want to call it bragging. I'll just say your data points. So when I introduce myself, I'll give you the example of mine, okay? Like, let's say you introduce yourself. We're at a cocktail party. We're enjoying some cheese and crackers.
Yes.
And I say, what's your name? What's my name? And I say, hi. Oh, we're holding up our fake crackers. And I say, hi, I'm Kim Rittberg. I help professionals become thought leaders through video and podcasts. I do on-camera media training and video strategy. I came here from 20 years in media. I was an executive at Netflix, and I launched the first ever video unit for Us Weekly. I've won 6 awards for my video marketing, and I am a national speaker, and I contribute to Fast Company. And you tell me, did that sound like super obnoxious and braggy?
No, it sounded like you're a really interesting and accomplished person, and you're giving me data points that I can relate to. So you're giving me a whole bunch of info that I could actually pick from and see what connects to me as a person.
Right. And I think that, depending on the situation, I sometimes add like in a written bio somewhere, I also say I speak Spanish and I used to perform improv, but not at the same time, obviously. So you can have moments where you have prepared humor to soften it if you're really uncomfortable. Like I recommend to people who are like, I can't brag, I can't share my accomplishments. I'm like, okay, so build it into your elevator pitch, but say it in a way that makes it lighter. But thank you for saying that. I used to, and I came to this point because when I was younger, so I had a jewelry business in my 20s, and my mom would basically, if I would go somewhere with my mom, she would just brag about me, right? So like in high school, she'd be like, this is my daughter. She's going to an Ivy League school next year. And I would be really embarrassed. But then I had my jewelry business in my 20s. And then I would say, oh, I have a jewelry business. And she'd be like, oh, she's being humble. She's been featured in Women's Wear Daily and sells her jewelry at Bloomingdale's. And again, I'd be embarrassed. But now that we're older and we really are building our business and we want people to see all the cool things that we've done because it can help them, I wish I had a pro bono publicist like my mom everywhere. And so we have to be Ellen Rittberg for everyone else. You have to be your own braggy mom, but in a way that feels natural. So that's the elevator pitch that I shared. I think online when we're sharing moments, any moment can be written in a way that is less about me, and can just be more about the teaching element. So that Google workshop can be something like, I heard such great questions from this workshop I led at Google yesterday, and I wanted to share with you some of my takeaways. So there's a lot of different like actual narrative ways we can do that. I wrote an article actually for Fast Company. I can send it to you. We can link it out. It's how to brag without sounding like a jerk. And I think it's important to just remember you have your own way of speaking and being, but the main thing that's important is to mentally adjust that all the things you've done that are worthy of sharing, write them down and make sure to put them in a way that feels right for you. And that's in person, that's online. So other things is when you win an award, like I won 6 awards for my video, and truly it was not me. It was a team of 12 people behind the scenes, editors, videographers, like producer. It was all of us. And the nonprofit I worked with does the most amazing work. And truly I wasn't being like, thanks to everyone. I really meant it. Like I really was like every single person in front of the camera and behind the camera was fantastic. When I won those awards, I made sure to be like, we are so proud of the impact we have put out there and that it was acknowledged by the Webbies, by the Shorty Impact Awards. And so you can share the luster. You can share the things that you took away. You can also share the honesty. Like I did a keynote last year and I thought I was going to throw up. I think it's okay to show I'm nervous. I did a video basically where I showed my preparation in a keynote. And I showed how I prepared for basically 13 hours for a keynote. I showed clips of me practicing in my pajamas, in my outfit, in my office. And I think that it demystifies it in a good way. It lets people know these are all the things I'm doing, but also it's not to just pixie dust and it happened. I worked really hard for these opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing that I find in common in all of those examples is that great audience focus, making them laugh, entertaining them, engaging them, educating them. If you are focused on the audience, then of course you can talk about the accomplishments that you've made if you can link it to what the audience can walk away with. So I love that.
One other thing is also, I think, sorry to interrupt. One other thing is people do like that connection. The other, after credibility, the other one was connection. So people like to feel connected to you. So for me, I'm a mom. And when I put in more personal content related to being a parent, both on all the socials, really, not just LinkedIn, people react to that. So when I was featured on local news, like basically they interviewed me about running my own business. And I did a clip where I had the kids watching me on TV and kissing and hugging me. And so it was more about setting the example for the kids that you can work for it. And just like funness of like, these kids are like, mommy's on TV. So sometimes there are other creative ways to say, what are people responding to? What are people liking in my content? And that's, you can find out through your analytics. What are people responding to in my content? And how can I build that in more in a way that feels more natural? And that also, will helps your content perform better, but also is really building on understanding, what do people like to hear from me?
And I love that we've been talking a little bit about your speaking. And I would love to talk about that a little bit, because that's something that you and I have in common as well. We have both worked with folks in front of the camera, with us behind the camera, but then we've also been in the spotlight ourselves. And I always love seeing you perform and speak, because I can see that you have a deep love for it. You have a connection with it. It's not something that you do just because you have to. So tell me a bit about your speaking journey. Have you always been speaking on stages and on camera, or is that also something that's linked to the business?
I have always been like connected to content basically since college. So I studied at Penn, the University of Pennsylvania, at their Annenberg School. And I, did some journalism work there as like a student. And then I, after college, had my own cable TV show, like one of those cable free public access ones. And they trained me on how to film and edit. This is like way back when with like VHS tapes, or beta, I forget, VHS. And so I had done some on camera work, but I ended up shifting into being a TV producer and writer. And I really love that. Writing really fast, learning how to write well, writing for the voice of an anchor, really learning all of the skills needed to storytell. But I'd always enjoyed like performing for people, but I was not like the theater kid. I was not the theater kid. I was not like the kid who sang Annie all day long. I didn't like to sing. I really didn't act. It's more that I liked to make people laugh and teach people and storytell. I know it's different than being like, I'm an actor, I'm a singer. It wasn't that. So when I went into journalism, I mostly was a writer and producer. And at some point, I actually decided to do on-camera reporting. So I was an on-camera reporter for a little bit, but most of my TV career was really behind the scenes, storytelling, producing, writing. At Us Weekly, I did a little bit of on-camera work, interviewing celebrities, sometimes doing the news. Again, I was like the boss. So like I knew all of the information. I really understood everything I was talking about, but sometimes I just didn't have so much time to be on camera. But it was definitely a flow. Like that was probably over 17 years. And sometimes I was on camera and then there would be years that I wasn't. So my skills were not necessarily sharp. And so then, basically when I worked at Us Weekly, I launched the first ever video unit for them. I led a 17-person team. I built their video unit. They sold for $100 million, which was a huge amount of money for like a print magazine. And then they were like very flattering about what I built. So the new company really loved the video unit that I built. I decided to leave. I had my second child at that time, and there was just like a lot happening with the corporate takeover and all of that. So I decided to leave at that point. But one thing that I thought about as I knew I wanted to build my own business was, if I'm hiding from the camera, I'm hiding from clients. No one's going to seek out Kim Rittberg besides my established professional network. So if I want corporate consulting clients, maybe I can still just network and be on LinkedIn a little bit. But if I really want to supercharge my client business, like really have incoming leads, really have a flow of business, I have to start showing up. And so that really lit a fire under me to say, get on camera. And then the more I started doing the on-camera work, I had also started teaching a little bit. So guest lecturing at Syracuse University, NYU, doing some seminars. And I think it really merged all the things I love. In my 20s, I did some improv comedy. My brother is a stand-up comedian, or was, and he brought me into that. I did that for like 2 years in my 20s, but it was really fun. And what I found is I've been able to combine the on-camera hosting, the improv comedy of my youth, and this deep expertise in video that I have. And so now I'm really enjoying bringing that to the stage. And it's like this merging of passions. So one thing I had to do when I brought it to the stage is say, okay, even though I'm excited to do this, I want to do this, like I haven't really given a big speech in a long time in person to a huge crowd. Really never. Like improv comedy in my 20s is different than being an executive and teaching about video to 300 people. And so I really had to take it seriously. And so for that, I had already been doing my videos. I have a podcast. So you're in the flow of speaking. But I got a speaking coach. I got my first keynote. Actually, I got a bunch of speaking opportunities in a row in the same time. But I had set in my mind, this is the year that I'm ready to teach more, to take bigger stages. I put it out in the world. I was like, I am ready for this. I wrote speaker on my LinkedIn profile. I put it in there and I started showing up more and then teaching more. And then I got these opportunities inbound. They came to me because of my content marketing. And yeah, and then it started happening. But it really was that sort of thing that I said to myself, I am ready for this. I do want this. And then I started marketing myself a lot on social media and through my podcast. And by being out there speaking and teaching, which is exactly what you would get in a keynote, that's been my speaking path.
I love that. There's so much commonality there in terms of looking at all the skills that you've learned through all these different things that you've done. The more you tell me about your journey, the more I'm inspired and impressed by all the different ways that you explored your creativity and you explored this need for storytelling. That's really what it is. That need to share your story, to share what you've learned, to share what you've observed. So I have two questions. The first one is more about the stage and the camera, since you and I both have had experience on stage and on camera. I always get asked this question, what is the difference between speaking on stage and speaking on camera? So that's the one I want to pose to you. And I'll tell you a little about what I say to people when they ask me that question. But first, I want to pose that to you.
Awesome. And one thing I also wanted to say about the idea of like getting to speaking. So I host a podcast called The Exit Interview with Kim Rittberg, and it features a lot of people's pivots and my own pivot. Like I run a business now. I didn't envision myself running a business, but bits from your past, kind of nothing you did is ever gone to waste. And so look into your past and say, when did I feel good? When did I enjoy this? And how can I bring that back? And so I think for me, it's acknowledging speaking and teaching and speaking has been a thread that I have always enjoyed, and leaning into it because it feels good. I'm getting positive response from the audience, from the bookers, and sort of that life is a combination of the experiences you've had and nothing just like, well, I'm not doing that job, so those skills are in the dumpster and close it up and light it on fire. Goodbye. It's just different. You can hold on to those things. Anyway, okay, shifting into speaking. That's a good question. The two things that have in common, I think, between stage and video is confidence and clarity. So for both, you absolutely need confidence. How that confidence is expressed physically and in your voice varies. Obviously, if you're speaking to 300 people, you're going to speak in a different tone than to a camera that's 2-3 feet from your face. But I think confidence is a piece that you absolutely have to work as a muscle and build that up before. And my most successful clients through my video strategy work, I've done a lot of mindset work with them. The mindset and the confidence to say, you deserve to be out there. People need to hear your voice. Think of yourself as helping someone else. So that confidence piece is really for both. And I think as you work on confidence for stage and confidence for video, your whole life will improve. Like your whole life will improve because you'll see yourself differently. But that's a piece you have to work on for both. Like, it's interesting. One of my clients, we started working on the confidence and the clarity piece of really clarifying like who she is and why she's unique. She's a consultant. And then she ended up landing a Fortune 500 speaking gig. And she got 2 clients. And that's because she was really using that renewed message that focused on the clarity and the confidence. So confidence is one. The second one is clarity. So clarity is the same concept for speaking and for video, but I would say clarity for video is one video, one idea. So especially in the short form world, your video can't be a tangent. It has to just be like really to the point. And if you have a longer video, obviously you can have different questions and answers, but you step back, it should have one headline. It shouldn't be like this, and this. And so clarity in video is really that one video, one message. And clarity in speaking is your speech has a main point and you can build it out with the points that you're supporting with. But someone should walk away and say, I'm going to do this today, or I learned this from Kim. I learned this from Nausheen today. And so the clarity and the confidence, I think, are really the things that are the same And there are nuances to that. Like when you build out your speech, clarity is going to look different in a 30-minute speech than in a 1-minute video. And confidence is going to be different. But I think those are the same pieces. I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, I love that you brought up that they have more in common than they don't, because that's the one misconception that a lot of people have. When I talk to them about public speaking, they say, oh, I don't really do a lot of public speaking. And then I ask, well, do you go on podcasts? Yeah. Do you do webinars? Yes. Do you ever do video courses? Actually, I want to launch my video course in a few months. All right, that's all public speaking. So the idea is that there's way more in common between speaking on this big stage with a podium, with an audience in front of you, and speaking on camera. And that's where I've seen a lot of people go wrong. So I echo a lot of the things that you just talked about: confidence, clarity, and really amplifying the parts of you that are going to relate to the other person, that are going to relate to the audience. There's a certain energy that you need to bring, which is, I believe, very closely linked to that confidence piece that you were talking about. So it's all about making sure that you have a camera presence. And that is a concept that I believe would be very similar to executive presence, because people have talked about that and studied executive presence for decades, but people haven't really studied camera presence. The idea is the same, that you create video content, or when you're on camera for a podcast or a live event, you bring a certain presence that compels people to listen to you, to follow you, to stay engaged with you. So that piece is the same, whether bringing that presence with you, it really, really matters. And that's something I really admire about you, Kim, because, and this is the reason why we have this as a video podcast, because I want to showcase how you bring this presence. I'm always really impressed by how you're able to harness energy and show up with these concise and clear examples and stories. So is there a formula for this presence that you've cultivated for yourself? Ever wonder why some people seem to be naturally confident speakers? People like Obama, Simon Sinek, Brené Brown, they all seem to be so confident and poised when they speak anywhere. I'm here to tell you, you can learn how to do that and more. My free newsletter every Sunday shows you exactly how you can impress every time you speak. Just go to speaking.coach to join us. And now, let's get back to the conversation.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you for that very kind compliment. And I like to tell people, I tell clients, I tell audiences this. I think the main thing that we have to remember is we're in a totally new era. When I started in journalism, the only people who would be in public or on camera were anchors. This type of man and this type of woman. You could fill in the blank for whatever country you're from, but there was a very specific formula. And even when I was interested in being on camera, like I had someone say, oh, she needs to lose 10 or 15 pounds. I was like, whatever. Like, of course, it bothered me, but that was the sentiment. You had to look a certain way. You had to speak a certain way. But what's really amazing, and I shared this with every single client, is you only have to be the most confident and clear version of yourself. We're done with that era of being this, sort of model-esque person who can speak on camera from 2 decades ago. Everyone is not only entitled to have a voice, I mean, it is a new playing field. And I don't just say this as a coach. I say this as a person who works in media outlets. And when we would source for hosts for podcasts or hosts for videos, yes, it's about being a good presenter, but it's really about being passionate, being knowledgeable, being authentic. So I think it's just important to remember this is not just like, show up, be you, it's good. It really is a professional thing. Like, I'm a former media executive. I know what people are looking for. They're looking for expertise. They're looking for authenticity. And so as you show up, you just have to be the best version of yourself. And I do think that piece gets lost because we all hate our own voice. Every person who comes to me hates the sound of their voice. Every person who comes to me asks me, oh, do you see this mole over here? Do you see this weird thing on my eye? I'm like, no one sees that. No one sees that. And if they do, they're not focused on it. So I think there's this bigger picture of accepting yourself. Everyone hits their own voice, join the club, move past it. Okay. there are ways to improve upon your speaking patterns, but like your voice is what it is. High, low, has an accent, doesn't. It's okay. Just own it. Just move forward with it. So I think number one is accepting who you are. And number two is saying, that's who I am. Great. How do I show up as that person with confidence and showcasing my expertise? That's, I think, the biggest trick. And I think as we shift into video strategy, which is what I've done for myself, I've said, okay, I am not a quote unquote media executive who wears pantsuits and is very serious. I am a loose, real person. I'm honest, but I'm nice. I'm fun. And it is really important that I show up as that, or this isn't going to work. It's not going to work. And I had this thing where I had this process. I went out and started promoting my podcast called The Exit Interview with Kim Rittberg. It's stories of self-employed founders, their inspirational journeys and advice they have for other people. And then Fridays, I drop 5-minute marketing tips. So, which by the way, you should subscribe if you want to learn more about marketing, especially video. But when I started promoting the podcast, I went on a podcast tour, meaning I got myself on 10, maybe 15 podcasts to promote the show. What I saw was I sounded fine, I sounded professional, I sounded good, but it didn't do a ton for my social media following. It didn't do a ton for listenership. I got some listeners. Then I was a guest, but then I thought about it and I was like, okay. I really listened to it and I realized there's not that much Kim in this. Like I sort of was treating it like I'm this like neutral journalist. But the truth is, like, if you're going to be out there, people want to hear from you and they want to hear not only your perspective, but also your personality. So I really went back to the drawing board. I'm like, I got to be Kim, who makes jokes, who studied improv comedy in her 20s, who made 17 people love working with her at Us Weekly. Like I had a startup inside that company and we had an amazing team that felt really lit up by me being their boss. I'm like, I have to bring that Kim to every podcast, to every video, to every stage. And that was a real process for me and my brain, because you have to let go of this idea that standing in front of a stage means talking like this, or being on video means talking like this. It's not. It really means being you. You're laughing, you know. And so for me, the process was saying, how can I be the most Kim that ever was on a podcast, on a video, on a stage? And what that meant was unleashing more of myself. Stop putting on this filter that we put on because we're worried about judgment, and just being more myself, but also polished. And that means knowing what I'm going to say. So even if I'm saying it with more humor, I always know what I'm going to say. Not verbatim, but broadly. I know my concepts. I know my frameworks. I know how I teach. But being aware that I have to be loose and more fun. And so what I saw from that experience was I regrouped, I applied my own strategy that I actually do now with my one-on-one clients. I call it thought leadership through content. And so I help people become thought leaders through content, like specifically video and podcasts. And I went on someone's podcast later that year. So it's the same year that I had this realization, I'm not showing up as Kim enough. I'm not bringing my personality enough. And I came to someone's podcast and I did an interview with her and I got 3 clients directly from one podcast interview. And I made, I want to say like multiple 5 digits in income from one podcast interview. And that was something where I was like, I just made $30,000 from that podcast interview. What, and not in that moment, but like over that next month, right? I'm like, what was it that I turned on there? And I listened to it back and I realized I was more myself. And it was a mixture of teaching, but also being more me and sharing more of my personal story and my personality. And that's, I think, the key that people need to bring out is don't filter ourselves so much because we're worried of what people will think. Just whatever you are, whether you're wise or soft-spoken or extroverted or funny, like bring all of that and then layer on your expertise and don't worry about being something else or being someone else. Really be the most you can be. And it takes a little while to get that persona, and that's okay. Not persona, but it takes a while to own the public version of your normal private self.
I couldn't agree more. Now, when I watch a news anchor, for example, it's actually a bit of a surreal experience because I feel like, well, why are they so robotic? Where's the personality? Where's this person's point of view? Why are they just reading a newspaper out? So that's exactly what I see working with a lot of clients myself, where they are hesitant to present the world with this public facing persona because they've never taken the time to build it. And then they feel that, okay, I'm just going to be generic. I'm just going to take on this default educational persona and just educate people all the time. So I love that you brought up the differences there, and I loved hearing about your experiment. So last question, I would love to dive into influence, especially the term influencers. You wrote this great article in Fast Company about how every CEO needs to be an influencer. And in that, you talked about how people now misinterpret the word influencer, or influencers just have such a bad rap that no self-respecting founder or entrepreneur wants to be an influencer. But the reality is that if you don't have influence, you're never going to grow your business. You're never going to grow your authority. So how do you build influence in general, or how did you build influence as Kim?
So influencer does not require you to wear a crop top. I think that's the first thing, is that unfortunately, this phrase has come up, and for some reason, I know what reason, but for whatever reasons, it has a stigma. But that stigma is basically weighing all of our success down, because too many people are now worried that they're going to be seen as like narcissistic lifestyle people. And first of all, that's not even true. So I'm friends with plenty of influencers, and actually they're running great businesses, and I'm impressed by them and good for them. So it's not a knock on them. But executives and CEOs feel like, oh, well, I'm going to be seen as a wannabe influencer if I start showing up. And I have a lot of my clients saying that. I have a healthcare consultancy client, and they were like, what am I going to put on LinkedIn? Like, what am I going to talk about? You're going to talk about healthcare. That's your business. And so one of the things that we talked about was, let's have you just bring what you do, showcase your personality, and put that out there, whether it's a video podcast or videos. And so, for example, that client, we started breaking down the idea of like, why are we on video? Why am I doing this? What is the point? And we started doing it. We went on a video podcast. We put it out there, and they've gotten their dream client. A dream client from another country found them, partnered with them, giving them equity in a company of theirs, getting all these podcast guest invitations. And that's because they're showing up on video. And I think that what we need to do is remove the stigma of the word influencer and leave the verb influence. If you want to have influence, show up on video. Forget about the word influencer. Just forget it. And don't even use that. So I remember I had a friend who works at a job, and she's an executive. And she said, Kim, I've been seeing you all over social media. Are you trying to be an influencer? And I was like, no. And I was really mad about it. And I was steamed about it. And I was complaining about it to my husband. And this is a friend of mine who I adore. And I was like, how dare she? And then I started thinking about it more. It's like, maybe she didn't even mean it rudely. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. Who knows? But then I started thinking, like, why am I so triggered by the word influencer? Who cares? And then I said, you know what? I am trying to influence people. I am trying to influence people to show up with confidence, to put themselves out there, to grow their business and their career. Great. I want to be an influencer then, I guess. And my own process has been telling myself, and this is, I think, to the point of where we started this conversation, which is one of the things I really deeply believe. A lot of people are holding themselves back because we feel this possible judgment, possible criticism from other people. We feel self-conscious. But I think we have to hold on to our goals, and we have to say, do I want to progress my career? Do I want to progress my business? Do I want to progress my client base? If I believe strongly in it enough, I have to set aside those fears and those worries, and I have to start building that strategy. So for me, I was like, I run my business. Hiding from the camera is hiding from clients. No matter how out of practice, no matter how bad I feel on camera. And my first few videos, I was like a little awkward. I was rusty for sure. And I said, I have to keep doing this because my business depends on it. And it takes a little bit to see it. But then I started doing the videos. I launched my podcast. And it didn't take that long. I started getting inbound leads. I started getting inbound speaking requests. So it does take time, but we're talking months, not years. Like it really does. It takes months, but not years to see that. And so I think it's the mixture of showing up with confidence and saying, I'm going to tune down the negative voices. And then having that video strategy, which really relies on credibility and connection, building those relationships. And then I have more advice for like actually building your video strategy, which I applied for myself and I apply to my clients. Like, for example, one person I have, she has 2 little kids and she's running her own business. And she came to me and she's like, I'm showing up, but like, I'm not really sure what to talk about. I was like, you're raising 2 little kids and you're building this amazing business. Bring both in. Bring in packing the lunch bag, packing lunchbox, and running your business. And then within very little time, she had 3 brand new clients come to her, sign the deal, sign the contract, close them because of social media. And so the really important thing is to say, define it however you want. Call it business development, call it sales and marketing, call it video marketing, call it content marketing. Don't worry about people judging you. Don't worry about the word influencer. If you want for people to see you as the professional and the industry leader you are, you have to be out there and you have to be on video.
I love that you brought up that fear of judgment, because that's exactly the pushback that I get from a lot of the clients I work with. That fear that what are people going to say? And very often it's the fear of what are people from my past life going to say, or my current work environment going to say? And the truth is, yeah, they are going to notice if you're doing a good job. The fact that they're noticing, the fact that people from your past life are just cropping up again and talking to you about the work that you're doing or how visible you are, which happens to me all the time, it means you're doing something right. So if you get a few trolls along the way, good, it's working. Because actually what's going to happen in reality is you're going to get 99% of the audience who's going to be on your side. They're going to be positive. They're going to be supportive. And yes, you might get 1% that aren't happy because you're not Beyonce. You can't make everyone happy. And I don't want to be Beyonce. I want to be me. So being the best version of yourself, being the most version of yourself, I love that. That's really the only way to connect with others who are like you. It's such a straightforward A to B relationship there. So I'm not surprised that your client got business when she was more herself, because you're sending out the signal that this is who I am. I'm putting out a signal here. Anyone who resonates with this, come on, let's go. I want to work with you. I'm sure you want to work with me.
And, one example I want to say of that. So I left being an executive. So just like our executive clients, I was thinking, oh, this like senior vice president that I just worked with last year is going to see me in this video on LinkedIn and she's going to think I'm lame and pathetic and desperate. And one person I work with who I respect very much, she's really at the top of her game. She texts me and she says, oh, I really like that video of what to do with your hands when talking. I'm like, oh, okay. People are not judging us like we think they are. And another example of how showing up helps, I got a message on LinkedIn, an inquiry to have like a call with a company, discovery call, someone I hadn't seen since college. And because I'm so active on LinkedIn, he was like, hey, Kim, I saw you're an award-winning video marketer. I'd love to introduce you to our marketing team at his like big engineering company. I'm like, great. Thank you for the intro. This is someone I hadn't seen in many, many, many years, hadn't corresponded with, hadn't seen in person. And we forget that even people who aren't engaging or commenting on your content are seeing you. And instead of us assuming that they're all thinking you're this narcissistic I'm sorry, I have do not disturb on, but some people are allowed to break through, my husband and my mom. Anyway, instead of thinking that anyone who sees us is mocking us, realize that most of the people are learning from you and enjoying your content. And so I don't know why we have that negativity bias. We shouldn't. Maybe it's like a biological protective thing. I don't know. But let's stop assuming that we're being judged for the worse. Let's assume we're being judged for the better.
I love that. What a great note to end on. Thank you so much, Kim, for that great conversation. Please tell us where people can find you if they want to reach out to you and work with you.
Awesome. So I have free downloads. One is 10 tips to make videos that make you money, and a bonus, how to shine on camera. That is at Kim Rittberg, RITTBERG.com. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram, both at my name, Kim, RITTBERG. And I also have a podcast called The Exit Interview with Kim Rittberg. Every Wednesday is an amazing founder. Nausheen is on an episode, and we take their story and lessons from it. And then every Friday, I drop a 5-minute marketing lesson.
I love that. Thank you. And we'll have all those links in the show notes as well. Thank you again so much, Kim. You've really generously helped us and guided us towards creating great, memorable personal brands on camera. So thank you so much for the conversation and for your stories and advice.
Hey, you're still here. Thanks for listening all the way till the end. I'm super grateful for your support. If you liked the episode, please take a few seconds to give us 5 stars on the platform that you're listening on. It would mean the world to me, and it will help more people discover Speak as a Leader. To know more about how I help leaders speak fearlessly, just go to nausheen.com. That's N for Nausheen and Sheen like Martin and Charlie. See you in the next episode. Till then, speak fearlessly.